Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 62, our agency's web design process with clients, overall design considerations, and examples. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast if you love business and real stories from the trenches. And after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share if we've earned it. Hit that notification bell too if you're on YouTube so you don't miss each episode. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable From the Trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Welcome. Another solo episode today. I was actually getting a little self-conscious because I have my knee up here. I'm not sitting properly. So this is going to be a little different today for a couple reasons. Number one reason, you'll see that I have a mic here. I've never had a boom before. But recently, I've been having some issues with audio. And I don't know if it's me. My wife says I mumble sometimes. Maybe I talk a little too quiet. That could be it. Or it could be something in the software that's processing it poorly or whatever. But in any case, I'm like, okay, let's see if we can up our game and improve the audio a little bit. I use a blue mic. I've had the same mic for 5 years, but I've always had it on a stand. And I would maybe move it, position a little closer to me, but I'm still a couple feet from it when I'm talking. You're technically supposed to be around a foot maximum with these. So that's what we're doing. A week or two ago, I ordered a boom mic. This is actually a blue figure. I got a blue mic. Let's get a blue boom. And also one of these shock guard things, whatever you call it. I'm still not an audio engineer. I don't know all the terminology yet. I'm working on it. We learn as we go, right? We're always learning. But so I kind of just set this up today. And I've been playing around with it, testing it, trying to figure out the best position for it. Should I have it above here so you still can't see it? Should I have it right? Because technically you're supposed to be right in front of it like this. So we're going to try that. It's interesting because psychologically, I'm like, it actually might be good to have it right here because there's a tendency if you have it on your desk somewhere or somewhere like hidden or where it's not right in your face, you forget about it. So maybe this will keep it kind of in the forefront of my mind that I need to enunciate and project my voice and talk into the mic. So that's that. But, it was really challenging for me to get this also psychologically because I have this nature about me that I want to keep things simple. In the beginning of this podcast, the first 31 or so episodes were all audio. I didn't want to do video. I was trying to keep things simple in the beginning. And I was using Zoom. Now I use Riverside. I have video. And I was going to try to not do this. But eventually, you just got to do things. I also got this little foam thing that goes over top of it as well. You're supposed to get these guards, again, whatever they call those, right? So you don't pop and stuff. I heard doing some research. I heard these did just as well. I think they're more for like wind and stuff, but I don't really have any wind in here. But if it works, it works. So I'll be talking past it anyway. I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue. So yeah, I mean, I do care about the quality of the audio though, on this podcast. And especially now that I'm going to be starting to show up on other people's podcasts. I just published one this last week with Elisa Millermoon. I believe that's her last name. I was on her podcast and I got another one coming up, scheduled in the next week or two. So, because I want to be on other people's podcasts. I think that's fun. I'm actually talking to somebody in about an hour. So I better hurry up. In about the top of the next hour, I'm talking to another podcaster. So we're talking about being on each other's podcasts. So it's time to maybe up my game a little bit, be a little more professional. It is what it is. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, I don't talk about design very often. In fact, on this podcast, we're all about business mainly and building stuff. Is design building stuff? Well, kind of. It's kind of an important part of the process. I just said a lot of P's there. Let's see how that worked. An important part of the process. You have to design something before you can build it when it comes to websites, right? Or almost anything, right? It has to be designed, even roughly designed. So I thought, it fits what we do here a little bit, but also I don't talk about design much. I'm a web designer. It's in my title, and I don't talk much about design. We do a lot of web development. We maintain a lot of websites. That's a big part of our business, but we do still design. And in fact, I just finished up a design for a client. It was actually for a partner agency. We did the design and now we're developing that as a block theme. So we design, and I design a lot of things myself. I also have another in-house designer where she will help me with various design projects. Maybe we pair up and work on the same project. So yeah, we do design. So why not talk about it, right? It's a topic that I think can be very, very interesting. I'm going to, in this podcast, I'm going to just kind of give an overview of the process of design. I'm not going to dig into all of the terminology and real details around design. I want to take this from the standpoint in this first episode on design. Maybe I'll do more. From the standpoint of the client and my relationship as an agency, as a web design agency, what that relationship is first, and then kind of the process and the things we talk to the client about. And then the things I am going to talk about, the various elements we think about as we're actually designing a website. Now, some of this stuff, it's interesting for me because I don't write on design a lot. So I don't think about it a lot from with words, right? So when I get a design project, I kind of just do it. And a lot of the things that are ingrained in me just happen. For example, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but like balance, having good balance and structure, that everything looks balanced. That's something that my eye just naturally kind of gravitates to thinking about subconsciously. That comes a lot from my art background, because when I was doing art, when I was painting, I thought a lot about balance, because any composition you create, there has to be that balance. So it's things like that I think about a lot, but I don't write about. I don't even communicate to other designers about or talk to anybody about. So that'll be an interesting thing today. So like I said, maybe I'll be talking more about design as time goes on here. I probably should. We'll still talk about web development and code and things like that, the other fun stuff, but we'll talk design too. I think that's good. And I'm excited to do it. So first of all, when I'm going to take on a project, and what we offer in terms of a service, unified web design, is we create custom websites. So we generally speaking, when I'm looking at a project to do for a client, or somebody sends me something, hey, we got a new client, they need a new website, they need a design. The first thing I'm going to think about is creating a custom design and then translating that into a WordPress theme, usually. But there's also pre-built websites out there and themes and templates that somebody might decide to purchase instead, maybe because of budget or whatever. But a lot of these principles still should be thought about. And because how do you know what a template, that third party that did the template or whatever is a good designer? You don't know, right? So that's kind of how we start to think about it. It's like, okay, we're going to create something custom, and we are going to be creating a wireframe, a mock-up, of this website or of this for this design. It starts kind of rough, and then, I'm going to talk about the process, but it starts kind of rough, and then we dial it in, and then we take that and we translate it to code. So our process is kind of this. So the first thing is, like I said, depending on where the business is coming from, if it's a direct client or if it's somebody referred to us, or if we're working through an agency, the process really doesn't change too much. The first part of that process is always meeting with the client. It could be just email. A lot of times we're jumping on a call, though, with the client to really talk to them and listen to them and ask questions. Generally speaking, when we get a design, we already know some things about the business because agencies I work with or ourselves will have an onboarding form that'll tell us key things about their business and what they're looking for. But then we can drill into that more in a conversation. And sometimes you hear things that you weren't expecting during that conversation. Sometimes I'm listening to a conversation that I think it's just a general design project or something. And out of that conversation, I realize they keep going back to this one thing, and that's their concern. That's what they're trying to solve. Yes, they want a whole new design, but maybe they're trying to solve this one problem. So I really zero in on that. So that's where everything starts. Then it's really about a needs assessment. It's really about looking for those pain points and things that, what their goals are as what their business, what are they trying to do with their website? The pain points, if they got a website now, especially, like, what are we trying to solve? What don't you like about your current website that we can fix, right? And we're going to be able to do the whole thing. We're doing the design and everything to development. So we'll be able to fix that somewhere along the line, right? And are there any, identify if there's any unique pages, any unique design elements or features that we need to worry about. And then that's kind of we're discovering what's going on and what is needed with this project. We're going to probably after that have to do some research. One of the things we're going to be looking at is we're looking at that as an industry. What type of website is this? Defining that. And what is the purpose of the website? What is their goals? And then just looking at it as industry as a whole. Like, if you look at there, sometimes if I get something, maybe I haven't done a lot in that industry, I want to go and look at the competitors' websites and see how those are designed. And that gives me as a designer an idea of I'm gathering this kind of information about the environment we're in and what people will expect. 'Cause it's really important. I believe that's really important that if somebody comes to your website, that they see what they expect to see. So if you have, let's say you have, a website, let's say a real estate site, but for some reason your designer decided to make it look like it's some other, like a legal site or something off the wall, like an artist site or something, the design style does not match the industry. That can be off-putting. It could be off-putting, or it could be interesting. It could take risks. Maybe it will set you apart. So those conversations have to happen, but that's the kind of your baseline, though. You want to say, what other sites in this industry or their competitors or whatever, what do those sites look like? So we can kind of stay within that frame. I will ask the client always, do you have any references or any sites out there you do like? Any features? It doesn't have to be a whole site. It could be just one feature of a site. I had that recently with the one I just designed. They have a form on their site now. It's a pretty outdated site. Forms like they collect information, but she didn't like that. But there was a competitor or a similar site, and the way they were doing the form was completely different. It was like a floating widget, and then you'd click the button to get more information, whatever the button says, and it pops up a form. She wanted that. So that was something I zeroed in on. I'm like, okay, this is a feature we got to worry about, right? That's a different thing we're doing there. So those are the things I'm trying to discover and pull out of the client and ask those questions. And when I hear something, after having a lot of experience now, when I hear something that's a little off the wall, I pick up on it pretty quick. I'm like, wait a minute. There's things I've been sent that sound pretty clear. And sometimes I get that from an agency too, where it's like, well, they need this. What's that going to cost? And I go through the requirements, something jumps out at me. I said, I need to know more about that. What are they doing there? Or whatever, Then you got to consider the content. Do they have content? Who's doing the content? Who's in charge of the content? Generally speaking, if we're doing web design development, we're not copywriters. We're not going to be creating your content for you. Somebody has to be doing that along the lines, right? So those are the things we think about. And then we think about it from the perspective of the user. Again, what are they expecting to see when they get there? And how can we design it so they have a good experience on the site? And you can call that user experience, UX, whatever. And that combined with the business goals. What calls to actions do we need? Call to action is it's something that is going to get somebody's attention, and then probably a button that says, go do such and such a thing. This is what we want them to do. We want them to join our list. We want them to get this paper. We want them to go into this funnel starting here, or I want them to just go buy something, so what do they want? I mean, is there a funnel involved with this whole thing we need to consider? So those are the things that before we even start, those are the things that we're really, really thinking about. Now, when we start the design process, what we do, we use Adobe XD generally. We've used Photoshop. We might use Photoshop in the future. We've used it in the past. We might get a Photoshop. Sometimes we get the designs and they're in PSDs, whatever. We can work with that. Some people might want to use Illustrator, or they have Figma and all this other stuff out there. We are pretty flexible in that department. But if we're going to design it from ourselves, if I'm going to design it, I'm probably going to use Adobe XD. It's just gotten so good over the last few years. It's really easy really quick to prototype stuff or do wireframes and then build it out. So, and what I'll do is I will build out the different viewport sizes. So you have 1920, 1280, and then some your different device sizes, mobile phone and all that. And so I'll start with one of those sizes, usually 1280, and then I will take that and I will flesh that out first. I might even show that to the client before I build out all the rest of them. My first goal is to come up with a concept, taking all those things I just learned and then coming up with a concept. Sometimes I get it on the first try. This last one I just did, I got it in the first try. It was just clear to me. I'm like taking in all the information. I'm like, and I designed it, sat down, designed it. And I'm like, you know what? This is it. But sometimes it's like, okay, but I could go in this other direction, or I could go in this other direction. So I might have 2 or 3 different versions that have maybe a little bit different approach to the concept. But sometimes it's just like, I just know what it is with experience. So, which happens quite often, which is good. Or if it's just some tweaks. There were certainly tweaks. There was feedback from the client. We need this worded this way. We need this, whatever. But it was minor stuff, right? And so minor enough where we actually went right into development while we're figuring that stuff out. So now the design itself, I'm thinking about the various elements on the page. I mean, you start by figuring out, what the layout's going to look like, what we're going to have. If you get a front page, which we usually start with, we're going to have a hero section, which is the top section you see. It's usually a big background and maybe some text and a button or a picture or a video. It's the first thing you see above the fold. So, and above the fold is anything you see when you first go to a website in your browser. That's above the fold. So, so we're figuring out what the structure of that page is, what the structure of the sections are, how that's all going to be laid out in general. And that's more of like the wireframe idea. And we may go right into the mockup and not think wireframe, but technically we wireframe it out first. And then we start filling in the details and the content. But, what's the hierarchy going to be? certain things are going to be more prominent than others. And even from a structural layout perspective, we think about size a lot. We think about space a lot. I am, one of the things I learned about years ago was spacing. And it was always these conversations. I did work with other designers in the past. It was always a conversation around modern design. What is modern design? And one of the things that we really identified back then, and I think it's still true today, is that things are not crowded, right? You go to some websites and it's just, you don't even know what to pay attention to. There's other problems too, but everything is just tight together and crowded. And I like to design with good space. I want to be able to breathe, and nice space between sections, even line heights, good spacing. Everything has enough room to breathe. So that's one of the things I think about. I won't even say I think about it because it's so ingrained that that's what I do. When I look at something that's a little too tight, a little too squeezed together, I automatically want to just blow it up. I don't even think about it. And then, how are things going to be grouped on the page? How are we going to balance? I talked about balance earlier. How am I going to balance the images and everything on that page, right? So you want something. I'm not getting into balance today, what that all means, but it has to, again, it comes with experience. If something's not balanced, I'll feel probably physically unbalanced. I'll just no, move that a little bit over here. And it's funny. Sometimes it's just a few pixels, just move it over. That's a little bit better. You want to have, that's one of the things I think about a lot. There's other fancier things out there, like things called rule of thirds. Now, rule of thirds, I actually learned from a designer years ago as well. And rule of thirds is where you kind of break things into a grid, and things is where things lie on that grid, and it's more pleasing to the eye. There's a whole psychological thing behind it. So there's things like that creep in as well. But for the most part, for me, it's just kind of I've designed and I've done art and I've done all this stuff over the years. So I think for me, it's more of, it just, happens in my brain. Does that make sense? It just happens. Something's working out there. That doesn't look right. Move that over there. It's instinct. Maybe that's the word. But I will think of things from that perspective. Sometimes if I get stuck, something's not looking good on the page, I will maybe think about that rule, or I'll think about other things, other methodologies out there and stuff. Sometimes you just have to play around. Sometimes you have to go out and find inspiration, even beyond what the client might have sent as a reference. I might go out and look just at random sites, look at sections of sites, how content's laid out, depending on what I'm working on, and just come up with some ideas. Maybe try that until, oh, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. So a lot of it's trial and error in that process. It's just thinking about it and trying different things until you nail something, and then you're on to the next section. So that's definitely a good thing. It's an important thing, not even a good thing. It's an important thing. You can't forget about the layout, right? So the other thing, another really important aspect of any design, good design, is the imagery and photos or animations, with all that other stuff too. But in terms of just photos, so a photograph or a stock image, that actually breathes a lot of life into a design. So much so that without them, it doesn't look like anything. Your website just falls flat, right? The structure, you might as well just collapse. Because one of the things that I've done in the past is we had a marketplace where we built 100 themes, right? And each theme was designed in-house. So I had a designer, couple designers actually for a while, and they would design something and then we'd turn that into a theme. And one of the things I realized was, because images, stock images and stuff was super important for us. The whole licensing thing was a thing. And so I had to think a lot about stock images. But I realized when you look at a design, all the designs were being sent to me and I was reviewing them, looking at them, like, without these images, it's just a website with, some words on it. Like, images were everything. And you could have good or bad images. And what was cool was we were creating these templates that could be used by anybody, themes. But you could just switch out those images with images in a different industry or different niche or whatever. But still, it made those images were super, super important. Backgrounds and things like that, those little stylings, super, super important. Now, depending on the site and depending on the client, some clients will actually go out and hire a photographer or do their own photos or whatever. Depends on what it is. Like an e-commerce client that they create their own images. Even the models and stuff you see on the site, they're actually hiring models to do that stuff. So that's certainly a thing. But especially if you're starting out, depending on the type of site you have, right, is the first thing. Sometimes you don't need your own images. You can just use stock images, quality stock images, but you use stock images. Not necessarily free ones. You can get premium ones. But sometimes that's okay. And like, again, if you have a smaller budget, maybe you have to go free. You do the best you can with what you have. We made some amazing designs just using free images. But then there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with stock images. Some people are just like, I heard somebody recently that were like, oh, we don't want these stock images. They were just, I don't know if they were ugly. They just didn't like them. And it's not necessarily the stock images in general that are bad. It's just the ones you chose or your designer chose, right? For me, I have a subscription to Adobe Stock. I found that Adobe Stock images, between that, Pixabay, and there's a couple other free sites out there. Between those sites, I can usually find the images I need. So if I want to go a little more premium, a little more unique, I go with the Adobe Stock, and whatever. But you choose good imagery, something that's going to look good with that design. Now, the one I just did, actually, that was one of the things they needed to change. So, and this is just part of the iteration process. So the first thing I did, I designed it. I knew what the niche was, and I chose a hero image, a background that was a little more commercial, and they needed something that was a little more residential. That's basically what it boiled down to. So I'll go out and find, another couple options. I think it looked good, but it blended well with the brand colors and everything else. They just needed something topic wise to be a little differently, or a different look, feel, depending on what they were targeting for their market. So stock images can be really good. And again, there's free ones and premium ones. Just depends on the project. It's case by case. Or if you can, and you got the budget, or you need to, if you have a product you're selling that really requires a more professional, unique, if you've got clothes, for instance, right? You're going to want somebody to be wearing your clothes. So you can't just superimpose that on any image. Well, maybe you could these days with AI and all that stuff. I'm sure there's a tool out there that could do it, but do something. Or if it's something, just anything like that, you may need to actually get a photographer. But generally speaking, those are the type of things I leave to the client. We don't have photographers in-house at this stage of the game. Talk to us in 5 years, maybe we do, depending on our client base. The other obviously important thing with design is the color and the branding, right? In general, branding in general, but color is super important. And again, usually when we get a project, a custom project, it's an existing business, or maybe it's a business it doesn't have to be existing. It's not always existing. It could be a new product line or new product, whatever. But they're going to have a style guide. They might have a style guide, and it could be more detailed or not. Or they will have just a logo and a color. It's going to be this color, this logo. Those are things first we start with. We have to start with that. And then everything else will go from there. We'll choose maybe complementary colors. Like in the case of, I keep going back to the same design because it's fresh in my mind, obviously, because I just did it. But one of the things I needed to introduce was they had the brand colors. We had a main color. I don't think we had any secondary or tertiary colors or anything. But I needed to choose a color that was complementary for the call to action buttons. And something that stood out no matter where they are. So one of the things you do with from a conversions perspective and a design perspective is you choose a color. And I've talked to this with other agencies and stuff. We've done this for other clients, where you choose a color. That color is the choice. You're basically training the visitors to see that color and take an action. So I chose a color that stood out from the rest of the design and was an action to fill out that form or to do any action I have that's the number one primary thing I want them to do on a page. It's using that color. That's the only thing that's using that color. So you do things like that because that's going to obviously help with conversions and helping. It's a better user experience too, because they know what their next action is. They shouldn't have to question, what do they want me to do on this page? They want you to fill out that form. So colors are super important. Obviously that all has to be balanced. And that actually has to tie into the imagery, the rest of the imagery, the photos, stock photos, whatever. We got to make sure that's all going to blend well together. Like that hero I did choose, it worked well with the logo color. They were using like a red. And so that there was some reds, oranges in that hero. So that, you think about too, you can't have something that's going to conflict with the rest of the brand. So, and last but not least, and I'll kind of leave it at this, last but not least, and often I do kind of leave this for last personally. I might have some ideas going into the project, or if they do have a style guide, this is answered for me. In a style guide, when I say that I mean, some companies will actually have a PDF they give you that has way more information than you need, but they use it for everything, for physical stuff as well. Throughout the company, no matter what they're doing through their products, they have this very specific colors, specific typography and everything. And that's what it is. It's typography. It's fonts. That's the last thing. Now, if I don't have anything, I'm going to probably look to the logo. I'm going to see try to figure out what that font is, depending on, again, what we get. Sometimes we get a font every company's different. I actually just worked with same design project. I learned a lot from this design project. A lot relates. There was somebody that worked at the company. When they got there, they weren't able to, they had a logo, but they had just the logo on the website. That quality, it was just that one asset. So they had to go and they had to recreate that logo. And so the logo should be in different formats. So designers can use that and maintain quality depending on how big it is, how small it is, and just have all that set. And so in that case, luckily that was provided me. But sometimes you got to figure out what that font is. And because the thing with fonts, you have to pair a font with a complementary one, the one that works well with it. And there's a whole science behind that, but not every font can be matched with every other font. Okay. So that's one of the biggest considerations. Generally speaking, you're going to only use one or a couple fonts on a website. Maybe you use one for like headings or, more as a design element. And then you have just your content font, which is different. So that's it. And then fonts can also become an integral part of the design itself. So you can actually use a typography and a font, kind of blend that into a design, an actual graphic design. So that's really, really important. A font can make or break a site, just kind of like imagery, photos, stock photos, color too. All of this can make or break it, but typography really can. I mean, and I go through that same process where I will have, depending on what I have to start with, I may try a couple different font combinations until I get one that works perfect. And with fonts, it's not just about the font, it's the font weight. And some fonts will have more options than others. So there's a lot to play with there. You can spend a lot of time just on that, and I usually do. So kind of the recap there is like, once we get all the information gathered, then I'm going to sit down. I'm going to open up Adobe Stock or Adobe XD, create my board, and start laying things out. And I lay out the basic structure. I know what I'm doing. And maybe I don't lay out the whole structure. I start with the heading, probably the header and the hero. Start with that and then work my way down. And then I start dialing in the details. I look at references. I look at, just work on that. Just kind of, it's a process of just starting rough and just dialing it in. Details, and trying different things until it looks good. And then always thinking about the color, always thinking about the typography. You think about the typography early on before you think about typography. Even then you're like, okay, something could look bad, and you may have to make adjustments, or you'll be like, okay, we'll deal with that later. The imagery, all that stuff. Is there going to be animations? Are there things? There's things with the thing with design is it's a little, the difference between just doing graphic design where you just have a 2D surface that you're doing design on. I guess this would be the same if you were like doing VR design or something, or artwork. There's movement to websites. So you can't always communicate that right away. And so that you have to communicate it verbally. Like that design I did, I had that widget there. I'm like, that widget, ignore that widget, because that's going to have to be a plugin or something we're going to integrate with to build that. So that's how you communicate. I say that's going to float. There are ways to animate that and present it, but usually you don't have to. That's something that can be fleshed out in staging. So that's the next thing we do. Won't get into all that today, but the next thing we would do is now once that design, the initial mockup's done, we present that to the client. We tell them, I will usually describe the design decisions, why we did this, why we did that. And if we need a call, we get a call with them and we go through that. They look at it. They say, this is awesome every single time. It's amazing. I'm joking. But that's hopefully what you get close to that, right? I did in this, might as well keep referencing this last one. That's kind of what happened. She loved it. And she had to send it off to her boss and to get feedback as well. And then I did get that feedback. But once we go through some iteration, in this case, we just went right to development because the things were pretty minor. But once we are done with that, then it'll go to the developer and they do what we call a translation. We take all that design, all the graphical design, and we turn that into code. And that code becomes a website. And that's where things started to become animated. And we might add effects, subtle effects or whatever, or animations. That's where it gets really fun to see it come alive. And that's one of the things I love about what I do as a web designer is I love the whole process. I love the process of, first talking to a client, you're first reading what their requirements are, talking to the client, digging into it, doing the research, turning that into a design, and then getting that approval, and then turning that into a site that's going to generate sales, conversions, and do all the things that a site does, and see the results of that. on every level is really fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I don't talk about design too often. I don't know why. It's not, I don't know. I think I talk about web development more and WordPress, and we talk about business a lot on this podcast, obviously. Maybe I'll talk more about design going forward. All right. You have a good day, everybody. You? Who's everybody? You have a good day. We'll see you next time. That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you're interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.